My name is Peggy Kell, and I'm the Voter Service Chair for the Oak Park River Forest League of Women Voters. Tonight, we are holding a candidate forum for the contested Oak Park River Forest High School Board District 200 municipal election. A recording of this evening will be posted on our website at lwvoprf.org and on the library's website for later viewing by voters. The League does not endorse candidates, but believes that voters should hear from those that are running to represent them. Our League will be having candidate forums for the contested races in Oak Park, River Forest, and Forest Park in the next few weeks. Please visit our website calendar, lwvoprf.org, for the dates and the links to register, as all of our forums will be virtual. You can email questions for candidates in advance of these forums by emailing lwvoprf1924@gmail.com. You will also be able to submit questions during the forum in the Q&A section. The Oak Park Library is our valued partner in this forum. Thanks to Rashmi Swain for all her help with the technology for this event, and to Amelia Vargas, who will be our timer tonight. Candidates will start with opening statements of 1 minute, followed by questions for all, and finishing with 1 minute closing statement. We will start in alphabetical order and then rotate through the candidates. Candidates are Tim Brandhurst, Graham Brisbane, Jonathan Livingston, and Brian Souders. First up for the opening statement is Tim.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you to the League of Women Voters at Oak Park Public Library, and thanks to everyone who has joined by Zoom. I really appreciate your interest in the future of the high school. I'm Tim Brandhurst. Let me tell you just a little bit about me. My wife and my 2 kids and I moved to the community about 10 years ago, and I've been active in the community ever since. In 2017 and 2018, I served as a member of the Imagine OPRF working group. I've served on OPRF's community council for the past 4 years. I served on the board of Applause. Most recently, I've served as a member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Group in River Forest, helping that to get launched in 2021. I'm an attorney by training. As a young lawyer, I negotiated public sector union contracts. As Director of Labor Relations for the Chicago Public Schools, I had a close working relationship with the Chicago Teachers Union. And more recently, as an attorney in private practice, I represent primarily clients in the social impact space. So again, thanks to Peggy, thanks to the League of Women Voters, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation tonight.
Thank you. Graham?
Good evening. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and also the Oak Park Public Library for providing this forum. I appreciate everyone's time and the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Graham Brisbane. I'm running for the District 200 School Board. My wife and I, we came to Oak Park in 2005 with our young children. Like a lot of families, we moved from Chicago. And as an ethnically mixed family, we were looking for a place that would celebrate and embrace diversity in all of its forms and also provide outstanding public education. And I've been an advocate for public education since moving here. And that has actually included being able to serve on the District 97 school board from 2013 to 2017. During that time, I learned 3 key tenets of board service: put students first in decision-making, always seek to understand and listen carefully, and build consensus. And I think using those tenets, I can be an effective board member for OPRF.
Thank you, Graham. Jonathan?
Thanks, Peggy. Thanks, Rashmi. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Jonathan Livingston, and I have been in Oak Park for a little over 3 years now. My wife and my son and I moved here just prior to the pandemic. And it did take a little while to get our sea legs, I think, in the community, but we feel very passionate and very committed to the community now. And my background is a consultant to nonprofits for over 17 years now in research strategy and program evaluation and governance and culture. I also teach at the University of Pittsburgh in public service and in ethics. And I've been looking for the right opportunity to really get involved here. My son just started at Lincoln Elementary School and is in the Spanish immersion program there. And I am thrilled to be hopefully be a part of the school board if I have the good fortune of joining. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
So my name is Brian Souders. Thanks for having this forum tonight. I've moved to Oak Park about 17 years ago, live in South Oak Park. I have 2 kids in OPRF right now. I have a senior and a sophomore. Like a lot of people, we moved here from the city looking for kind of a city lifestyle, very, very good schools, and a diverse community. I do marketing, communications, and public relations. And in the community, I've been a leader for Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts for around 10 years. This has been really rewarding for me. Working with kids, getting them outside, learning life skills, and seeing sometimes these really little kids grow up to be adult leaders has been really rewarding for me. I also serve as a docent for the Chicago Architecture Center for 20 years, and I give tours of the Frank Lloyd Wright buildings in Oak Park. And I hope that people will think that I've got something to offer to the OPRF board and will vote for me.
Thank you, Brian. The first question is going to go to Graham. What are your thoughts on tracking or detracking efforts for incoming freshmen?
So that initiative, which the administration launched as part of several initiatives to address equity, could be termed actually honors for all. And it's allowing children to come in and all gain access to a higher level of teaching and being academically challenged. And it's in the early innings. We need to monitor that program for data and results. And you probably won't see meaningful data signals from that effort until the conclusion of our first academic year. But I think it's a worthwhile initiative. And I also think in some circles, there's folks who are concerned that it's somehow taking away, but it's actually not doing that. It's creating access and opportunity for kids who previously weren't able to access that higher, more advanced level of programming.
Thank you. Jonathan?
So I agree with Graham. The Honors for All program is really about increasing opportunity and access for our student population. It's I think a great first step in addressing equity issues, and I think that there are, as an institution, OPRF has really been gaining a lot of steam, making a lot of positive moves in addressing equity. Moving forward, I think there's a lot of work to do. I do think we will start to see what's working and what isn't by the end of the school year. And so I think that I'm excited to see what those initial returns are. But, you know, they will be initial returns. We'll have to keep in mind there will be longitudinal, more long-term returns as well. So definitely a very positive development, and look forward to seeing what those returns are this summer.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I'm also in favor of it. I know there was some concerns at the beginning, and I think we're going to again have to wait to see how this, you know, tracks out. But you know, sometimes there's systemic problems, and you've got to change the system to try to solve those. And I think that this is a case for that. Of course, it's an equity thing, but I'll also tell you that I've heard from teachers at the high school where, you know, they weren't quite sure that they get kids who are prepared for the classes that they take as a freshman. Because they're not sure where they place coming out of the junior highs. So this might not just be an equity solution. It might be a real solution for everybody, so that regardless of who it is, everyone goes in and they take pretty much the same core courses the first year. And then the OPRF staff can determine how prepared people are and make recommendations on where they can go after that. So I think that this will be more than an equity thing. I think it'll help people get slotted and help them go to the level of class that will truly challenge them the most and take some of the guesswork out of it.
Thank you. Tim?
I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think it's really important to understand the Honors for All program as providing academic excellence for everyone and providing access to that excellence for everyone. And I support the program. I'm committed to making sure that it is successful over the long term. I think that we're going to see some results and some interesting early data even before the end of this school year. I think it's within a week or two, we should know the full extent of course selections from this year's freshman class for their sophomore classes. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see. Are there early indicators that more kids are choosing honors classes as sophomores than maybe would have if we hadn't embarked on this initiative. There are other early indicators that we're going to see come online in this semester. We have to be really rigorous and really thoughtful in tracking those and adding the supports that are necessary in order to make sure this program succeeds.
Thank you. Jonathan, the next question will start with you. How does the high school help students and teachers deal with the constant barrage of social media during class time?
Well, I think that, it's been a very positive thing for one to check in phones. I think that that's been a very successful implementation in the high school setting. That certainly helps, without question, building a culture that's has some bulwark against the constant onslaught of social media. But I do think that, as we move forward with a lot of the hot topic issues around the high school, we need to continue to be aware of the power and the influence of social media and how that plays a role in how we discuss and engage over some of these very, very very high level salient topics. And sometimes, we need to be a little more mindful that social media has the power to skew and mislead a little bit as well.
Thank you. Brian?
I think that the steps that they've taken so far, which is basically, putting your phone away into the vault, if you will, when you get to class, I think it's a very good initiative so far. Because it does become distracting for people, but also from what I understand, it's also very unevenly applied, where some classes, the teachers are very strict, and other classes, the teachers really don't do anything. And I think that sometimes these are challenges where you have policies that are applied really unevenly. How effective can they be in the end, right? So I think that that's an important thing that we need to look at. And also, I'd like to see us not just trying to get social media out of the classroom, but I mean, social media is going to be a part of our kids' lives, whether we want to be or not. I'd like to see us do a little bit more, let's say during the study hall, during the advisory period, and have some more discussions on try to steer a healthy and just have discussions on healthy use of social media and limits and those things. I think could also be really helpful.
Thank you. Brian?
Tim,
sorry.
I agree with both of the answers so far. I am really gratified that the phone home system is working and that teachers have embraced it, and more importantly, the kids have embraced it, that the feedback from the kids so far has been that they appreciate not having the distraction during class time. I think, the interesting lesson there is that kids are okay with not having their phones with them at their desks during class time. They just don't want to be the only one that doesn't have their phone. And so if it's everyone that is treated equally, the kids are okay with that. And I think that's maybe a lesson that we should try to apply when it comes to social media use. There's a really interesting article, and I think it was in the Washington Post recently, about a number of private schools where student leaders have agreed upon rules and have helped their classmates agree to implementation of rules restricting social media use during the class day. And I would love to see that kind of a program at OPRF.
Thank you. Graham?
Well, no surprise that all four adults are cheering the idea that kids have to put their phones in lockers during the school day. And I understand the teachers like that as well. So I think that's a very healthy step. But I think there's an interesting connection between that and the broader issue of teen mental health, because I think social media can oftentimes be a source of stress, anxiety, and depression. Coming out of the pandemic, those are certainly glaring issues. The CDC just put out a recent report reporting on unprecedented levels of teen depression, particularly among girls. So I actually see that as a pillar of equity work, because in addition to academic supports, I think it's critical for the school to also provide psychologists and social workers to address the social, mental health aspects for our kids, especially coming out of the pandemic, which was so traumatizing to so many of our students. Absolutely.
Thank you. Brian, you're going to get this next question first, as soon as I find it again. Safety in the school. My senior, and that's not my senior, this is the questionnaire. My senior comes home consistently talking about fights in the hallways and cafeteria. What can the board do to ensure the safety of our children while in school?
Well, I think one of the big things, it was actually some action taken in the last couple of weeks, is that there's going to be a strengthening of the internal security teams at school. They've been asking for some help in this area, and the administration's been working with them on getting some more people, deploying them in the right places. My senior and sophomore talk about how some of these fights are happening in the same places in the building. Seems to me that those are places we need to deploy some more people, especially during passing periods. I think is really key. And I also think we need to work the restorative justice aspect of this really hard. And the kids who get into fights, that we have a disciplinary process for this to help deter things that go on as well. So I think it's a multifaceted approach. I like to see that there's some progress, that we're going to be hiring some more security guards and things like that in the school for next fall to try to head these things off. We're making progress. So I think there's still some work to do.
Thank you. Tim?
I think it's an indication that we need a much wider embrace of restorative justice and restorative justice principles across the board, across all the adults and all the students in the building. I think that kids, when kids have beef with each other, they resort to fighting because they don't see another alternative. They don't understand that there is another system of accountability that they can implement, that they can institute a restorative justice approach. The kids don't understand restorative justice until it's being used in a disciplinary manner. And so I think training and teaching all of the faculty, all of the staff, all of the students in the school, and really a full-scale embrace across the school community would go a long way to helping the situation.
Thank you. Graham?
So my kids, my daughter graduated OPRF in 2018, my son in 2021, and my wife and I are currently mentoring a current OPRF sophomore. And I asked them, how often did you see fights tend to occur? And they said it's a fairly regular occurrence, which I don't think really surprises many of us, especially when we look back at our own high school experience. It's speaking to social media, it's a case now where fights can end up online. And the problem has always existed in high schools. I think restorative justice is an important initiative to address that, because violence in any form within the high school is totally unacceptable. I was at the school board meeting last Thursday, and I thought the board did a good job of pushing back on the administration's initial approach to this problem, which was more staff, but focused more around exits, whereas the problem really occurs where the highest traffic of students is occurring at period changes. And as long as the board tasks the administration to target the problem in that way, I think it can be solved.
Thank you. Jonathan?
So I also I agree with a lot of what's said here. I'm a huge proponent of restorative practice, and the more that we can examine how we can incorporate restorative practice, the principles and techniques involved in sound restorative practice at every level of the school, the better off we're going to be. And so when it comes to hiring new security staff, new staff of any kind, really looking at how putting a lot of very careful thought into what those individuals are bringing to the culture, what they're bringing to the school, according to looking at it through the lens of restorative practice. And I think that I also agree. I was at the board meeting last Thursday. I was delighted to see the board reply to the request for new personnel at the doors with some very, very thoughtful questions. And I think it's very encouraging that we're thinking about these things already.
Thank you. Tim, you're going to have this next question first. Is the high school expanding vocational offerings for students that do not plan on attending college?
Yes, it is, but not quickly enough. I think this is a really important issue, and I think that we should be doing more to publicize and to promote alternative pathways for kids that are just not interested in going to college. There are so many opportunities through apprenticeships, through the trades, through dual credit programs that we have with Triton. And so we should be encouraging kids who don't see college as a viable pathway to take advantage of all these opportunities.
Thank you. Graham?
So that was asked as a yes or no question. And yes, there is vocational programming going on at the high school, but a lot more could be done. And as I understand it, some of our relationships with outside organizations and entities such as Triton aren't as full as they could be to help facilitate broader experiences for our kids. For a lot of academically oriented families, OPRF can be a pressure cooker of expectations around grades, your GPA, where you're going to college, and so forth. But we have to be more mindful in providing opportunities and recognition that there are a lot of different career paths and interests that kids can pursue. And the high school could stand to be a little more holistic in serving all those interests.
Thank you. Jonathan?
So yes, there are opportunities, but there is, without question, the need for a broadening of those opportunities. And this has been front and center in my candidacy from the get-go. I am passionate about looking at how we can provide better vocational skill-based opportunities for the OPRF student population, looking into building more meaningful certificate programs as well, identifying what the pipelines are in the local economy, the regional economy, and where those apprenticeship opportunities might be. This really is an issue it's an issue of equitable opportunity and access. Everyone should be able to play to their strengths. And I think that is a community we should all strive for, where all of our students come to school and feel like they have the opportunity to pursue what really suits them best.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, so this is something I know a little bit about. My son's been really active in the auto program, and this has become his passion, actually, so much so that he's going to college at Southern Illinois to be in their auto technology and engineering program. And part of that passion was ignited by his experience at OPRF. But I also know that he has friends and colleagues who were turned away from classes that they wanted to take because there wasn't capacity, which I think is really tough. Another thing that I think with vocational is that I would like to see us find a way that kids can experience these things and almost do a sampling rather than a total commitment. Like if you wanted to go into auto tech, you have to commit to an entire half of a year to do it. And that only leaves you a handful of opportunities through your career to look at some of these alternatives or be exposed to them and truly commit. And, if you have a kid who's 16 or 14 or 18, like asking them to commit to something like that is really difficult for some of those kids. So I'd like to find us some way that we can sample those things and make that a little bit easier for people to experience it without having to make a massive commitment.
Thank you. Graham, you're going to start this next question. What is the high school doing to make up for students' lost instruction time during COVID? How has their mental well-being been monitored and addressed during these times?
That's a question that is probably best addressed to the administration. We were fortunate as candidates to have been given a briefing session by Superintendent Greg Johnson back in January. And when I made a reference earlier about the Honors for All initiative being just one of several initiatives to address equity, there was also part of that presentation some detail about multi-tiered systems of supports, which is that more comprehensive look at what the culture and climate is like in the building, what the experience is for kids as they're coming through. And, my key concern as a candidate, if elected to the board, is ensuring that the board is prepared to provide sufficient resources, again, for the social workers, psychologists, and the programming that support not just the academic aspect of the high school experience, but the social and emotional aspect as well.
Thank you. Jonathan?
So during this campaign, I've had several at times excruciating conversations with, and I don't mean the conversations were excruciating, but the content I was getting back from the parents, the feedback was painful, about relaying the experiences that their children had gone through, and you know, in the spectrum of you know, mental health, sometimes you know, addiction issues, which can be very closely related, as we know, and there's without question work to be done in creating better communication between intra-school parties, looking at, you know, where those systems of communication break down, how we can really, you know, provide the students with a more trusted network, and focus on building the capacity around those needs.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I to a certain extent, I echo what Graham said, is to be ready to offer support services to kids who may need it, because I've seen with my own kids, but also, you know, I talk to kids who are, you know, I've talked to teachers in junior high, in high school, and it's like kids were affected by this and they've had issues. And I think this is where some of the behavioral aspects come of it. I mean, kids being isolated for almost 2 years in Oak Park really created some issues with people being able to relate to each other. And I think that these are some things that we need to work on. And I think it needs to be a multifaceted approach, because I've also heard that sometimes some of the things that are going on within the school are kind of hokey, you know, and in the more broad sense, where I think some of these things could come down to a more individual, or a much smaller group, like things that could be done in the study hall periods, advisory class.
Thank you. Tim?
There are two parts to that question, and for the questioner, I would commend to you the superintendent's State of the District report issued in December. It goes into enormous detail about the extent of learning loss that we probably experienced at OPRF. And I think that, you know, the top line takeaway is that the learning loss overall is not of concern. It seems to be in line with what other districts across the state may have experienced, and it's something that we can make up very quickly. There are two categories, though, of students who have suffered learning loss that is really alarming, and those are kids with IEPs, and kids who qualify for free and reduced lunch. They suffered a much more significant learning loss, and we need to be tracking and watching that bounce back to make sure that it happens soon. The second part of the question around mental health, we could talk all night about this. I believe that we are in a crisis with our students' mental health. I believe that our kids suffered trauma during the pandemic. I don't think that we're doing nearly enough. I don't think as a high school we're treating it as a crisis, and I think that we need to.
Thank you. Jonathan, you're going to have the next question first. Firearms are the leading cause of death for children and teens between ages 1 and 19 in the United States. As a member of the school board, what specific actions will you take to prioritize gun safety throughout the school community?
Well, again, I'm going to beat this like a dead horse all night long, but I do think that restorative practice is a huge, huge part of you know, building a culture that understands and respects something as difficult as gun safety. I do think that, you know, I think we all agree, from other previous debates, that the answer is not having a police officer back in the building. We don't think that is, we know from the data that is not good for culture. And there are several negative things associated with that. The answer really is about building community and respect and empathic channels and feedback systems in the school where, you know, everyone feels safe to talk about whatever they want to talk about and feels like they have the dignity to be heard.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I think this is a challenging one. I agree that I think that we need to have our internal staff be aware of these types of things, but I think that it also, there's a real risk in having the pendulum swing so far the other way. I don't know how much of a problem that we have or that we've had at school. But I think, again, using the restorative justice and using the types of disciplinary aspects that we already have and an awareness of the internal staff both teachers and staff, I think is really key to us trying to at least be aware of this. And if we do have problems, have a process in terms of that we're going to follow when these things do come up. I think that's also important in being prepared.
Thank you. Tim?
I'm a big fan of Moms Demand Action, and I really appreciate all the good work that they're doing on this issue. I was gratified that the state government took action regarding assault weapons, and I was pleased that the government signed that into law, and that Judge Kendall recently issued a decision upholding the legislation. So we are making some progress on gun control in this state, slowly, but some progress. I do not support the reintroduction of a sworn police officer patrolling the halls of OPRF. I don't think that's the right solution. I do not support introduction of any loaded weapon into our high school, whether that's faculty or administration or even an Oak Park police officer. I just think the risk of harm is too great, and that risk rests disproportionately on the shoulders of young Black men. I don't support any weapons being having any place inside the high school.
Thank you. Graham?
I think this is obviously a challenging national issue and certainly a crisis. The question might be, what can a school board member do about an issue like that? Certainly, you can support the right kind of climate and expectations for the building itself. And for a school like OPRF, one of the interesting things is when you think about some of the curriculum topics in freshman PE, it's not just physical education, it's other things like self-defense, it's interpersonal relations in dating situations. Conceptually, you could introduce topics such as, what if you know there's a gun in your home? What do you do if you become aware that a friend of yours has taken possession of a firearm? I think those kind of tactical topics could be introduced as part of the education that kids are receiving when they're first coming into the high school.
Thank you. Well, speaking about coming into the high school, how does the high school ensure that the transition of 8th graders from Oak Park and River Forest to the high school is seamless and supportive? And Brian, you're going to start us off.
Yeah, this is an area that I think that we need to find a way to have better collaboration between District 97 and District 200. Again, I've heard from high school teachers who say that it's challenging sometimes. The kids who are coming from our middle schools are not prepared or are not even teaching the same methods of, let's say math or science, and they have to do a lot of remedial work when people get there. I think is a real challenge, and I think that there's also some challenges with the culture of, let's say, the IB curriculum, where we're going from junior highs to high school, and by that I mean this philosophy where 80% of your grade is based on tests and only 20% is based on homework, because I think this has horrible incentives that where kids learn to just skate by on the test and not do the homework. And then when they get to high school, when you actually have to do the homework because it's challenging, they're not prepared for this at all. So I'd really like to see us find a way to be more collaborative with D97 so that we can have a much better transition.
Thank you. Tim?
I agree that the collaboration between D200 and D97 and D90 is really important on the curriculum side, and I would like to see more of that. I think that what we miss at OPRF is the understanding that when 8th graders are coming in as 9th graders, we aren't just onboarding students, we're onboarding families. And we need to embrace that, and we need to help entire families understand how to navigate a really difficult environment. And so all the materials, all the sort of OPRF 101 kinds of instruction and onboarding that we can provide to parents, I think that we should. I think that we really miss an opportunity there to help families get started and to navigate the 4 years successfully. So that's where I would focus.
Thank you. Graham?
So for better or worse, we have a fragmented school system in which our middle schools are a different district from our high schools. There is definitely a lot more room for better collaboration between the three districts, D90, D97, and D200. I also see this as a really critical equity issue because just even for fully engaged parents, it can feel like walking into a foreign country trying to figure out the high school. The course catalog reads like something you would get from a university. So I think it would be good if the middle schools could identify the more at-risk families and kids who need some very intentional outreach and some mentoring and perhaps some kind of a buddy system to really help those families navigate what can be kind of a Byzantine and intimidating path as you come in for your first year at OPRF.
Thank you. Jonathan?
So I think without question, there's several areas of opportunity for us to work better with the middle school demographic and help prepare those students and families for that transition. I think that I'm going to take one of the things that Graham said in the very end there and run with it because it's something I've seen work and I'm passionate about it, is mentoring. I think peer mentoring is a very powerful way to help students prepare for new settings. And I think that, you know, I used to be a director of school-based mentoring programs. I saw how powerful school-based peer mentoring can be in helping prepare students from transitioning from the middle school environment to the high school environment. So I think taking a good look at how we could sculpt a new program around peer mentoring that is not optional, but it actually is baked into the system. Everybody gets a mentor when they make that transition, and everybody in the high school has a mentee.
Thank you. We're back to Tim with the first question. Equity is often used as a label. Please give some specific barriers to achievements that exist. Let me start again. Please give some specific barriers to achieving that exist at OPRF that need to be eliminated so that all students can realize their full potential.
Wow, that's a great question. I will answer that from a facility standpoint because so much of the work of the Imagine project and so much of the 5-phase Imagine project, long-term facilities plan, is devoted to overcoming barriers like that. I'll give you a great example, and it's a topic that we talked about earlier, and that is the culinary arts program. So we have kids who are not going to go to college, but they are going to train in conjunction with Triton for a culinary arts degree. That is a pipeline to great middle-class jobs in a great food region, and they can get college credits through Triton, through our culinary arts classes at OPRF. Sounds great on paper, but in practice, we have a commercial kitchen facility at OPRF that is non-functioning. And so it's a great example of how our facility presents a barrier to a program that should be functioning and that should be working in terms of equity. Thank you.
Graham?
So this is a great question because the term equity gets thrown around a lot, and it can be confusing what is really meant by equity. And I'll give you my very concise definition. It is addressing with intentionality, avoiding a predictable outcome based on your racial, socioeconomic, or gender group. To address that, the work of equity is about the allocation of resources and the enabling of equal access to opportunities for all kids. And with that as a table setter, I'll point to another reason I'm supportive of the Honors for All curriculum for freshmen. My daughter, when she came from Julian to OPRF, she had poor math grades, but she tested well. The counselors wanted to send her into a lower math program right off the bat, but she self-advocated, and me and my wife were there standing right behind her. I'm concerned about those kids in that same situation who are not yet ready to self-advocate. Maybe their parents can't make the freshman registration of classes night. It's those kids I'm concerned about, that we make sure that we give them the same access to opportunity that all the other students have.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Well, there are a couple things that are that come to mind as barriers. One that we are already beginning to address, and that's we've already touched on, which is the need to really provide a more robust vocational skills-based opportunities, training for our student population, and also more certificate opportunities. The other one that is not at our feet quite yet, but I do believe will be there soon, is how we look at testing our students, and how the SAT, teaching to the SAT is very quickly becoming outmoded. Several of our most prominent universities are saying it no longer matters, because the rubric doesn't really illustrate the things that they really value or really think goes into what a great student is. So we still are very much rooted in teaching to the SAT, and I think that it is a barrier, and it's one that we're going to very soon start having more robust, meaningful conversations around how we reinvent that or rethink that.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, so the original question was about like some specific aspects of equity, and Graham hit on one, which is like the tracking. I mean, there are inherent biases that are in the system and sometimes in people. So what we're doing is trying to change the system and try to take those biases out at the beginning. So tracking is one of them. And the other thing that we talked about is like, look, this is a big, giant institution of 3,500 kids, and it's hard to manage. I mean, I have a nephew who goes to a college that's a third the size of our high school, right? And not everyone has someone to advocate and help them work the system. I mean, I can tell you over the last 4 years of having a kid in the school, there are times where the system is either almost impenetrable or dismissive or just not there for kids. And not everyone has parents who are that plugged in and can help you manage and work your way through the system. We need to find those ways that you need this code to work through the system and try to eliminate those, but also try to get more people involved to help work the way through the system.
Thank you. I lost track. I lost track. Was that it? Graham, you have the next question. Should the funding question for phase 2 go to referendum?
So philosophically, I support the use of referendum bonds for long-term capital projects. It is the best practice method of financing the infrastructure needs of public facilities. And what it does is also helps to spread that cost out over the future generations of the users of those facilities.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan?
So this has come up obviously several times, and I would echo something similar to what Graham says. I am an advocate for referendums. I think they are without question, a very powerful, useful tool in our democracy. I think as it pertains to the current situation, I think the discussion is a lot more nuanced than a yes, no answer. And I think that I think the board has been committed to a very thoughtful, community-wide, involving a lot of diverse actors in the community, very thoughtful, empathic dialogue around these issues and how we can best move forward. And I trust they'll make the right decision, whether they decide to go to referendum or not. I think that I trust that they will be making this decision with integrity.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, this is where I think I'm pretty different from the other candidates, is that I am emphatically say that this must go to a referendum. This is a massive capital building project. The standard, the norm, the culture is that when you do this, you go to voters and you ask for the money. And that is what needs to be done in this case. And look, we have a lot of baggage that, Jonathan wasn't here for 10 years ago that still exists today, where the board intentionally tried to go past voters and build these big projects. And the board is still overtaxing us every year, 5 to 10%, and just putting it into a cash account. And these are not things that engender trust with the community. And if you're going to decide to go back out and intentionally try to bypass voters, and the only reason you can do it is because you're overtaxing when you shouldn't do that in the first place, I think you're running into trouble, and it's going to just create more relationship problems with the community than building the pool, gym, field house without going to them ever will.
Thank you. Tim?
I think this is one of those situations where it's important to understand the role of a board member versus the role of an advocate. I think that Brian articulates really well the view of one portion of our community that feels really passionately about the fact that we should go to referendum. And I respect that view, but that's, of the people that I talk to, the people that I'm hearing, that's one portion of the electorate. I'm hearing just as many people who are just as passionate, if not more so, about going forward with Project 2 immediately without delay. These are people who are angry that we don't have shovels in the ground already. And then I think there's a third part of the electorate who is, I think, sort of broadly, generally supportive of Project 2, but their big concern is they don't want their property taxes to go up any more than they absolutely have to. And so the board is, I think, has the responsibility to listen to all of these constituencies and to try to find common ground between them, or at least to thread the needle between all these different opposing views. I don't know what the board is going to do. The current board is going to make this decision. I'm confident they'll make a good one, and it's going to be one that I'm going to be able to support going forward.
Thank you. All right, let's build on that just a little bit. The Imagine projects have taken up, it seems like, a lot of space and time of the school boards for the last few years. So what do you think is the next big challenge that the school board will have to face or tackle? And we start with Jonathan for that one.
Well, so the first thing will be to, respect and follow through with what the recommendations are from the board once they've made that decision. I mean, it's as the fiduciary agents of OPRF, it's our responsibility to maintain fidelity to carrying on, the plan and implement the plan. I think we need to also take a good look at the other iterations coming up, which I know they're already doing that too, but really keep focused. There are several different iterations of this, of the facility overhaul. And this is a big one. It has a big price tag without question, and it's an emotional one, but there's going to be more emotional discussions as we move forward around the other iterations of these projects as well. And we need to just continue to apply the same process that was applied with Project 2 to the future iterations of the projects as well.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, so I want to address something Tim said, that there's these equal kind of people, groups of people who say we should go. Some people just want shovels in the ground on a pool, and another group. We did an advisory referendum in Oak Park 2 years ago, and 75% of people said that capital projects more than $5 million need to go to a referendum. That's 75% of people said that. This is not a tiny minority of people, right? To me, the biggest challenge is not Project 2. The biggest challenge is, how does Project 2, Project 3, Project 4, Project 5, and $80 million worth of maintenance, long-term maintenance over the next 10 years, how does all of those pieces fit together in a community where we found last week in the survey of Oak Parkers, at least, that one of their top concerns is affordability here. So I don't think we should be looking at Project 2 in a vacuum, which seems to be the way people want us to look with it, and just get shovels in the ground and not look at what's going to happen in the future. We need to look at this holistically and see a plan on what the facilities can be done in the next 5, 10, 20 years, and how the taxes are affected by that, rather than just doing this one thing and getting it over and figuring it out later.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, I just think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what a long-term facilities plan is. I was really gratified to watch the Community Finance Committee meeting Tuesday night, and so much of the conversation Tuesday night was around funding options and debt options to use, and making sure that we preserve the district's ability to go forward with projects 3, 4, and 5 after we pay for Project 2. So, I think that's just, I think that's sort of a misunderstanding. The question was, what should be in future projects? And I think the only accurate answer is, we don't know. We don't know yet. The further we get from the original Imagine plan from 2018. Project 1 deviated from that plan. Project 2 is deviating from that plan. And so going forward, I think that's a chance for the board and the community to have a bit of a reset. I support John Duffy and C's call for a racial equity assessment process to be part of formulating projects 3, 4, and 5. I had a good back and forth with John about that this morning. I completely support their position that we should engage in that process. And that's going to be a really important driver in deciding what to include in future projects.
Thank you. Graham?
So first of all, just regarding Project 2, for the avoidance of doubt, I fully support Project 2 because doing nothing is not an option. And I think it's misleading to imply that it makes sense to go armchair quarterback what the Imagine team did, the thousands of person hours and 40 members from our community in developing that long-term facilities plan. Now, Peggy, what I heard your question ask was, what are the next challenges? I didn't hear necessarily what are the next capital projects. So I'll answer that challenges question. And I think we need to normalize our fund balance and use better transparency and use of data to demonstrate to the community that this is a fiscally sound and well-managed district. When we do so, we will have the necessary resources to devote to work on equity and the opportunity gap, which remains to me the defining issue in public education, even more so coming out of the pandemic.
Thank you. All right, our last question is going to start with Brian. Do you believe eligible students should be encouraged and given an opportunity to register to vote during school hours?
If they're eligible to vote, I guess I don't understand why we would not, of course.
Okay. That's I
You're
like that
eligible to
answer.
vote,
I'm
like,
gonna
why
hold you to
not?
that
I mean,
answer.
there's a ton of stuff that happens at school, you know, that's from the community and whatnot. I think that, frankly, I think we should be encouraging this. And if anyone needs help doing it, I'm sure your organization or I would be willing to help do that if that's something we want to do.
I am going to write down your name right now, Brian. Okay.
You have my contact info.
Exactly. Tim.
I agree. I think it's a great idea. Whatever we can do to encourage students to register, to participate in democracy, to vote, to be engaged in issues and advocacy, I think it's fantastic. If we could bring ballot boxes into the school, we should. If we can bring kids to the ballot boxes and have a mass voting event, I think that's a great idea. I would strongly encourage that. I tell you, our kids are so engaged. They know what's going on. They are active. I think the best interview I've had in the last 2 months as a candidate was from a student reporter at Trapeze, and she was asking great questions and hard follow-ups. She knew exactly what was going on in the high school and exactly what the issues were in the campaign. So I strongly encourage that.
Thank you. Graham?
I think we were all interviewed by that same reporter from the Trapeze, Clara, and what I remember is she was excited to tell me that she is 18 and therefore this is the first election that she can vote in. And knowing we've got a bunch of 18-year-old seniors, I didn't know this was an issue or problem that somehow they're not able to register, but heck, we could facilitate registration happening right there on campus. Kids are getting excused as seniors they can go off campus and go have lunch and so forth. They certainly could use that time to go get registered to vote. So I absolutely support anything we can do to help new young voters get registered and participate in the democratic process.
Thank you. Jonathan?
I think hands down, everybody over 18 should be excused from whether it's school, their places of work. It should be treated as a sacred right to participate in democracy and to vote. And so, yeah, without question, to register or to actually vote on the day of the election, whatever it may be, it should be unconditionally an excused absence.
Thank you. I know COVID has put a damper on getting into the schools, but we are going to make another big push this fall to get any eligible 17 and 18-year-olds registered to vote, and we just need to be able to get in there and So school board members, keep that on your agenda. That is for the questions for tonight. And so we will start with our closing statements. And Tim, we're back to you at the start. So you have 1 minute for a closing statement.
Great. Thank you, Peggy. And thanks again for moderating tonight. And thanks to the League of Women Voters. Thanks to Rashmi and the Oak Park Public Library for facilitating. I appreciate everyone watching tonight and taking the time and your interest in the future of the high school. I'm asking for your vote. Early voting starts on March 20th and election day is April 4th. And I hope that you'll consider voting for me. When you're making that decision, I think, one way to approach it is to think in terms of the unique experiences and skill sets and perspectives that each of us would bring to the board in this moment. And I think that I would be a unique contributor to the board in multiple ways. If elected, I would be the only person on the board who has personally negotiated union contracts. I would be the only attorney. I would be the only river forester. I'd be the only former member of the Imagine OPRF group. And I think that someone who's familiar with the details and the recommendations and the thinking behind those recommendations would be particularly useful on the board in this moment. And so I ask for your vote, and I hope that you will vote. And again, I appreciate your interest in the future of our community's most important institution, our high school.
Thank you. Graham?
Thank you again to League of Women Voters and the Oak Park Public Library for facilitating this forum and for everyone for sharing your time with us this evening. My name is Graham Brisbane. I'm asking for your vote either on Election Day, April 4th, or when early voting begins on March 20th. Please visit my website, grahamford200.com, to learn more about my background and my platform issues. I would like to use the balance of my closing time to promote an event happening tomorrow night at the high school, which is Empty Bowls. And this is a wonderful event where student-made, custom, unique ceramic bowls are provided to you. You pay for the bowl, and then you go and have that filled up with soup by some local restaurants. It's a terrific fundraiser that supports Housing Forward and also Beyond Hunger. Hasn't happened in 2 years due to the pandemic, but it's a great way to experience the high school, support a great cause. Miss Doherty, who's the wheel throwing teacher, does a wonderful job leading the students. The bowls are terrific, and I strongly encourage everyone to try to make it if you can tomorrow night, 6 to 8 p.m.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Rashmi. This has been wonderful to have this opportunity to participate in this. I'm Jonathan Livingston. I'm asking for your vote on April 4th or early voting March 20th. I think that there are a lot of very salient, very at times rancorous things going on in our debate over facilities and specifically Project 2. But I am really taken by what I see as a very hopeful, positive development in the community. I feel like the Imagine process has really gathered the community together in a very meaningful way and has promoted a very empathic, thoughtful process. I think that the board has really taken that in stride, and I think there's just a lot of very positive developments going on right now that I'd be thrilled to be a part of.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, so I also want to thank the league for hosting tonight. I know that it takes work to put these on and with help with the library. I want to thank the competitors for another, I think, enjoyable and respectful evening as we go through this campaign. Obviously OPRF is an important cornerstone of our community, and there's tons of good things happening. We're really seeing progress on a lot of fronts. That said, I really feel like we need to get a better handle on financing. Over the last 6 years, OPRF has overtaxed us by more than $46 million, and just put that into a fund that's for a house of $400,000. That's $2,700 that was just taken and nothing has been done with yet. We should not be doing this in a time of high inflation. I think that we need to push harder for equity gains, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement with the school and its community. I think that all things are not quite as rosy, and I think that there's really work that needs to be done there. I hope that you think that I'm one of the people that can help fix some of these things and help improve, keep pushing for improvements. Check out my website, brian4oprf.com, and thanks again.
Well, guys, thank you. It was a very enlightening evening, and I really appreciate all your participation. Public service is the bedrock of democracy, and we thank all the candidates for their time tonight and for choosing to run for local office. Oak Park and River Forest are tough communities to be in local office. I say this from experience. So thank you all for putting yourselves out there, and hopefully for the service that you will give us. I want to remind everyone that a recording of this event will be posted on our webpage and also on the library's website once it's been done. As been said by the candidates, early voting starts on Monday, March 20th, and election day is Tuesday, April 4th. More election information is on our website. Please remind your friends, neighbors, and relatives to vote in this election. Local elections are important. Even though we have many uncontested ones this time, local elections are important, so please get out and vote. Thank you all for your interest and attendance tonight. Look at our website for some of the other candidate forums that are coming up, and I hope you have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.